Good evening. Why I'm wearing a solar cross? Because it symbolizes the sun. It's a religious symbol for me, not an ideological or political one. So please, don't take me for a neo-Nazi skinhead. Meanwhile, I would like to read from a prototype some thoughts that are not contained in the Occulta Corpore, but were contained in the prototype called Occulta ex Deum Convivia. So, certain thoughts that I would like to read, and perhaps for your enjoyment, or perhaps for general interest, they may be of use to some. So let us read. Perseverance is like water shaping a rock, as a bird that flies through the air, representing inexhaustible perseverance of the creative forces of heaven. All is furthering the right man and woman at the right time. Through effort and perseverance they gather, further, knot and dissolve in harmony. Whenever people are wrong, their minds and feeling congested, ignorant, deluded, depitched from purpose, disharmonious, detuned. The everlasting spring of heavens does not stop. It calls us all inexhaustibly. It is the human beings that stop expressing its spirit, falling under the sway of appearances. It is darkness that obscures motions of the ever-fertile fountain of heavens. Sublimity and subtlety. Strength within is like a blade. It is never drawn, it is mild and at ease. It is generous, yet demonstrates only through whitened wisdom and force that is resolute in pregnant ideas, strikes with dragon thunder and lightning to return to itself, recoiling. The jade dagger is a ceremonial artifact and it represents devotion to tradition and the heavens. It never symbolizes strife. It is the purity of its balance and focused resolution. Subtlety is impartial and just. While discerning and measuring, consulting the heavens to reflect them on earth, attempting to understand heaven and laws of heavens and the revolutions and the changes upon earth, all in accord with harmony and changes to adjust and amend oneself accordingly. All ideas are understood as divine forces of motions that are contained before the creative force, initiates motions through force phenomenal diversity, and leads to their multitudes, e pluribus unum. Perfect ideas descend from created heavens as forces that illuminate, shattering the shells of darkness into oblivion. Through divine proportions stemming from perfection, the forces and ideas are delimited by form. This cosmos is in order and adornment. All ends and beginnings are the same as eternity. Noumena penetrates Ouroboros, the divine serpent of Kronos, an infinite as, and denoting the measure of time. From A to B. All time furthers the... that was already mentioned. Love should be understood as a humane feeling. Perhaps humaneness. Love follows humaneness and is a close term, very difficult to define. Confucius avoided defining humaneness. It may be something akin to realizing or pitching a human being to the divine nature through the right movements of his intellect, feeling, and hidden forces occulted, while moving swiftly through the world of nature and human enterprises and endeavors, but it is still rather ambiguous. In tradition, hierarchy of accord, free people that agree on a hierarchy of merit, service, religious societal order, virtues, piety, and social mobility as human beings are not equal in qualities. The differences are settled in hierarchies based on justice, equity, when no one is really left out, and all put to purpose, embraced, reflecting inner true world worth in the position in service to the whole. In ancient times, such exclusive features as racism or exclusivist religions were non-existent. One is harmonious with the position in the earthly theater. At the same time as people, their merit and abilities change. They are allowed to ascend and descend through social ranks. Plato's Republic was realized in the Tang times of ancient China, with much success. Analogy. Justice is regulative. In essence, it is the distribution of force and power based on deep laws. As a force, it is a reactive way of restoring harmony when injustice, disharmony, is encountered. That's how metaphysical jurisprudence should be understood upon earth. Not through human laws, but through the signs of times, man-made injustice torn by the law of change results in decay, and the further it is removed from metaphysical deep jurisprudence of gods and providence, the greater the consequences on earth. Metaphysical jurisprudence, however, cannot be fixed by mortal laws. It may be approximated in penetrating insight and wisdom of mortals. Laws are arbitrary codifications, and when abuses deprive justice of wisdom and justice, it is not only partial but strikes these whom it was bound to protect. By observing the law of causation, one sees the events emerge in time and thus penetrates into their laws, and skillfully foresees the patterns of change. Sages of the old time did not have access to gargantuan complexity of information and knowledge or science as we have today. Yet by perceiving the structure, change, causation, by relating heavens to earth and men, by knowing memory, history, and the theatre of the world, by divining the pattern from continuity of this motion, they could penetrate the current, past, and future event with wise pondering and astute foresight, and thus act consequently if time required to do so. All base, vulgar, and uncouth things that are discordant with the reflection of the law of heavens are cast out. Airborne thoughts soar high above like a falcon into heavens, and after seeing luminous things with their souls, as if star-born, equipped by providence, they incarnate the observations in the men or women of the time and age. Hindrances attempt to fix in irrelevant things, better to emanate a spacious, unprejudiced mind with grand ideas like the starry spaces, humble like a grass on the wind. Beaten speech, action, deed, thought, stance, perseverance, whenever possible. Aspire to fix the spacious awe within the movements of the mind with a rod of reference or a system of coordinates that help to move through the architectures, palaces, and temples of your mind, soul, spirit, and heart. What is inferior or degrading is developing bad habits, including mental ones. Thus correcting oneself all the time and making amendments whenever one falls is of immediate and continuous importance. The restrictive responsibility of a mind giving more to focus and concentration when activity is well-shaped, diamond-like clarity is born. One touched by the dragon lightning is aroused to action as a hero or a sage, as if receptively receiving force and shaping it consciously. Inner truth is always more important. Do not disperse it to four winds by unconscious, mindless activities. It is the foundational strength. It is easy to compromise it by exposure or mindlessly talking about it as if it could be expressed in words. The Socratic irony, retain it at heart, soul, and spirit and mind. Misfortune, motions of the external should never influence inner composure and composition. Perseverance of an action event wanes and becomes powerless if it is baseless, or fake, or illusory, and is continuously renewed if it is a part of expression of force and laws. What appears to be permanent in human eyes is a mere illusion. The motion of starry heavens is pursued regardless. Obtaining something prematurely when one is neither prepared to handle it might result in misfortune, nor are the circumstances present to accommodate may eventuate in a disaster. Purpose is to be discovered by the true will. The latter is to be sought for in accord with the expressive forces of heavens. The will of one is one through many. It is the movement of divine ideas, forces, and ontological powers. The expressions are different amongst the world of men and women. According to individuation and discovered purpose, one becomes a master or maestra in the field of their inner work, alchemical. Be warned, if one loses his inner composure, sanity, and is put into schemes of the other of uncouth, vulgar, base, and low things, one will gain negative audience and thus be scorned, according to the measure of assessment of others and their fitness to see. The wise never scorn or punish, they amend for they understand. What seems to be proud to others may often be protectiveness. Assume a humble and soft outward disposition so that you will avoid being judged as an arrogant, but retain the courage and persevere in it along with strength, and use it whenever necessary. Ambition is the force that pulls beyond one's strength and measure, whether good or ill-willed, and damages the structure of one's moderation, aspirations, walks and deeds. Soaring too high, we fall upon ground and the ruins of our own walks. A failed sage deserves the mockery of hells, yet should rehabilitate himself if not lacking strength. A true one is perfectly at one with heaven, a companion to them. Ignoring codependence, community, one builds a mental tower above. Although he is a prisoner of his own making, he separates himself and falls into wicked things. Delusion, ignorance, anger, attachment, he starts to detest his friends, community and fellow species. The emperor sat on the throne of his consciousness, gathering his senses, mind, heart and soul, and thus directed affairs of his self in accord with heavens, as ordained. That is the sole ruler of himself herself, and its societal arrangements spring forth from people that order, renew, and further these heavenly expressions, if true. If an emperor is pulled into political bickering, partiality, distractions, compromising his inner self and truth, his consistency and perseverance in the way, the heaven withdraws, and he turns into a man on a facadic throne or a political leader commanding people left and right with no sense at all. Chuang Tzu, although fit to be an emperor, denied the crown as not to compromise himself in the way. The Confucian decision is to carve order and tie oneself with the world, thus laying foundations for the next future times to preserve for others. From the perspective of the golden times, modern times may be corrupt, decaying and failed, but are the only thing we see and take as normal, business as usual. We don't even look back to greatness with the vector to the past, as if our memories will be accursed and erased. Curse as removal something good from us. The most dangerous are dualities within dualities, or splitting the negative into two negatives, or the positive into two positives and scaffolding them with false, illusory premises that deform a harmonious expression. It splits the harmony of a man and woman open and sows the wound, cutting it deeper as it bleeds and scarifies into pain. Reflections in phenomena are tokens of deeper analogy if they are understood correctly. The sage should both be like the heavens and embrace things like nature, aspect of a great paternal, maternal mind. One may lose all his or her composure and thus become imprisoned on the strings of recognition, while in truth he or she has done nothing worthy of such, and thus the self-gratification is leading to vainglorious corruption. Through tension of concord, mutual things emerge in harmony. It is much greater feature to achieve mastership by scarce means with no support than through a privileged training. Good habits should be strengthened and guided, once recognized as beneficial. Likewise, that what is recognized as counterproductive should be branded and eliminated as it appears, chased away like thieves. In Greek tragedies, those tried by the heavens are the ones most favored. The unbroken perseverance in overcoming heroically is worthy. The blade of grass overcomes the storm. Restraint does not mean being inwardly static. Stillness of the mind is mature in great motions. The value of comitas, or brotherly sisterly friendship from Republican Via Romana, friendship in good humor is of great importance. Loss of friends is dangerous to a developing young character. Isolation and alienation breeds contempt and arrogance, or despair and depression, unless checked by still strength. Only in maturity one may return to seclusion if one may be in the company of heavens on his or hers own. One is never left alone in honesty if one recognizes the sign of invisible companionship. It is better to withdraw and to be reserved than to affiliate oneself with the wrong people or fools. The latter may not influence a strong character, they may be swept under its influence to their benefit if the strong character talks many ways, without antagonism. But to a weak character in training, they threaten practice and may pull the young person under the bad influence, then it turns towards the bad. Ordo ab chao is a renewal towards concord. The ability relies on finding strategic points of the whole and amending them likewise, so the house of cards falls naturally, but is immediately swept into a different reformed structure. It is not brought to ruin, but falls into a new structure. So when a religion or societal or ideological or political structure becomes destroyed, better prepare something beforehand, so the essence flows straight into it. So many heroes vanquished in youthful despair. The clay is potent, may it be molded instead of going to waste. Any obvious laws that become a forgotten known in its simplicity should not be taken lightly. Often being reminded of most apparent of truths activates the knowledge that is taken for granted. But never apply too much remorse of the muse of this particular idea. In the most dangerous of situations, retain cold blood and clarity. Sharpen the senses and focus. It may be trained. Wasting time away without continuous effort in perfecting and precaution is pointless. When struggle comes, we are swept under its force. Climbing a mountain after assessment of many paths. Many winding paths, we pick the optimal one. We never climb all the paths at once. But with the mature sight, we measure our experience, knowledge, chance, fortune, condition, skill, and pursue the proper way. Prosperos law, Shakespearean. Omnia mea cum porto, all acquired in honesty is your own forever. Everything superficial comes and goes out of its own accord. Self-correction, self-amendment, commanding oneself that what is not lasting but occasional should not be admonished. The authority stems from the loyalty of soldiers and transparent dealings in wise commands. A Roman general was saluted to as representing the pride of the sun, thus his soldiers saluted by covering their eyes. As if outshined by the commanding authority, his efficiency relies on Fingerspitzengefühl, awareness of everything in the battlefield at the tip of his fingers. We may relate this to commanding oneself, or the army within, also as spiritual battlefields of hearts, minds and souls within and without. The forefront, the avant-garde, is the true representative, as if a leader that encompasses all that he or she leads. Hesitant people need to consider the genuine character of any enterprise. Once they agree with it, their purpose is ever stronger because it is possessing clarity. One may talk with people of many walks of life and recognize them, but with reserve and guarding himself as not to expose too much. It is better to question and listen than to be questioned and heard. Harsh measures strengthen the opposition. In fact, the hindrance is not becoming stronger, but we grow tense within with the hindrance as the subject of our focus too much. Thus, proper discernment, assessment and judgment of the situation as it is established points of reference that are not overly static or rigid, but strong, at the same time malleable enough to suit the conditions in an accordant way, that is to be judged by wisdom, knowledge and experience that we possess to aid us in our decisions. How often irrelevant things may absorb our focus. Say, if we contemplate the starry heavens, we are not pondering a little quarrel. If we perceive the world image, we are not distracted by a material object nearby or something much lesser. It is a mere petty annoyance. Order is taken as natural, and each has his position due. No disparity arises. Classless society breeds classless people. A quote from a different author. And contempt and envy for superiority above mediocrity. A quote from a different author still. What it inclines is also that if the elites are classless themselves, they are not mounted on social respect and legitimacy, and thus they are no better than their inferiors and often much worse. There is a thread of humaneness running through people high and low, throughout the civilizations and cultures. The measuring of simple patterns and deciding on the point of reference in simplicity makes profound order. The doctrine of simultaneous engagement, as in Buddhist meditation, one simultaneously meditates on the emptiness of all phenomena and engages in the activity. Likewise, one holds the greater picture, the illusions of phenomena, the changes, the reference, and thus acts or stills in all the right moves and proper motions around them. When an underdog, but of war, stay strong and persevere, the ones who endure misfortunes make a strong spirit that, if directly properly, shape themselves into resolute steel and focus, attempting to incorporate the virtues and ideas, the ethos of metaphysics reified. When amongst elites you see mere inferiors, unworthy of trust, or abandoning the secluded way, stay away from them. As an inferior, hide your inner worth and truth in times of rule of the inferior. Never flatter anyone. As a superior, do not allow anyone to flatter you. Evident inner worth should be spoken of as little as possible. Likewise, one should never boast of anything, because it is an inflated principle. Fortitude, combined with guarding one's words, one may suffer in silence, angero peto principle, but that forges character and ethos. When words begin to flow in pain or bitterness, they turn into evil and hurt and hate, if not checked properly. Soon arrogance develops, and one invites scorn and contempt from the environment. It is better to be patient and full of restraint, contemplating the signs, right thought, right speech, right action, one preceding the other, defaulted against virtues developed by the light of reason, embraced, solved within and judged as good. Likewise, in the mind, too much stiffness may give rise to delusion, ignorance, arrogance, to little self-worth, and certainty brings irresolute dispersion of one's character and nature. Both should be regulated and checked in balance. Promotion of one's own over other people's leads to factionalism, and that leads to splinters. The structure is aiming at elevating one's own over the rest, and therefore encounters resistance and promotes conflict within. External and internal strife on interfactional strife basis, and that overspills throughout societies. Mutual distrust propels into mutual paranoia. Possession and mastery over one's mind, nature and heart is that which shapes, molds, forges, and rectifies the spirit. Whether living through turmoil or saddening times, one has a sense of purpose without inflation. Modesty is the mean in between fullness and emptiness. The sage renders himself alike to nature, which is evident in his walkings. Sometimes separating to unite on solid grounds that are agreed by both parties, and sweeping the resolution and direction, shaping it onto a new path is necessary. The process of gathering the freed social and personal energies and directing them in a masterful fashion is that, if that is not done, the byproducts and splinters are hindering a correct resolution. Biting through for its own sake is survival, or an attempt to grind one's teeth and persevere, biting through with a view, a vision in the mind, simultaneously engaging the direction, the cause, the solutions, tactical and strategical thinking about the effects is of utmost importance. Childlike commitment with boylike contemplation of being reactive in a simplistic way, or retorting to misfortunes in egoistic fashion, may corrupt many a man. With a broader view, one commits and discards, self-grasping carries forth with resilience. It would corrode his self-reliance and independence, and create falsehood that he could wear like a mask and undergo affliction of this self-imposed falsehoods, losing all sense in the end. The star that shines upon us equally in other tradition is the eye of Ra as the supreme deity in the solar system. Old passions taught me well. They burn out in great fire, and they scorch mature in a young man. When the threshold of self-destruction is reached, one is finally brought to one's own wits, and changes the course by 180 degrees, pursuing healthy habits, or destroys himself and others in the process, most often himself. Outmanned, outgunned, and in a solitary war, broken-hearted and betrayed, it is better to seek friendship of starry heavens and deities, shielding us and adopting us. A mountain upside down starts to collapse under its own weight. A world upside down is bound to crumble. What matures in patience is stronger at wisely using its accents in need of accommodating times. Nothing hidden. Sincerity and honesty with the heavens, one does not need masks, for he is transparent. Anyway, anything hidden comes from the dealings in the world of men. It is, however, in stark contrast with heavens when the falsehood is arising in dealing with the divine. Most often we are false with humans, therefore we cheat on ourselves not believing in divinities, and we are false to divinities. When a human being masquerades himself in front of his kin to gain temporary superiority in his scheming, all is known anyway. When he carries forward his habits and pretends to cheat or trick the heavens, he is exposed at all times. Lady Chance, Wheel of Fortunes, the first characterizing the unforeseen, the latter, the changes. Innocence is not naivety. Wise precaution and awareness is required to discern. Holding firm is also expanding within. It is a highly focused enterprise in which our inner strength grows with time and activity, not a passive endeavor. If firmness and truth are abandoned, one pursues wrong images with strength. It all goes to the wrong, like with anger. The spirit of heavens is contained in mountain-like men. If he lets his composure go by anger or irritation or aversion, of what good is his firmness from before? He must retain it or return to it at all times. Guard your words and train by the mean of words, otherwise the character gets spoiled. Understand the words you are pursuing. Ignoring responsibility or not being aware of this fact or pretending to be ignorant to shirk off responsibility brings about a blind leader that is not conscious of damaging influences he creates for others in societies. Not given to hypertrophy of any of the life's content or the mind, soul and spirit, we round it and complete it in proportion that it demands. Everything in moderation, nothing in excess. Continuous spiritual fire is renewed by the heavens like a phoenix. It never burns out. Like the suns, their splendid light is renewed by the irons. The image of the world is rearranged upon waking, renewed. The mind and senses memorize it. The selfhood creates an illusion of permanent continuity, something graspable. It flows through our consciousness as a mask. Rest centering around great misfortunes, a new way is found. It shines brightly as it is a different way. No longer we are troubled by any of these misfortunes that befall on other men. It is to be solved within by realization. It is not to be found elsewhere. If one plots too many threads, benign or malevolent, one gets captured in another's net. One may not quickly heal nor repair broken people in societies. It is easier to spoil and ruin them than to guide and guard them in recovery through firmness. If one cannot find affinity with a close friend, may he find affinity with the deities and the providence that established a correct relation to the heavens and sweeps everything into necessary order. Soon friends arrive again. A loyal companion or wife recognizes the blackened wrapping and goes through serious effort to bite through them in the wronged men. To see the diamond, if there is one, of affinity and friendship revealed is this. The fates are cathartic. The wonder that almost reach an abiding place observes the rain falling through the mist. Increase of fortune may create satiation, or by fates this fortune may be taken away, thus bringing about misfortune. Also the laws of organizational, informational entropy and negentropy in biology. Oh, the dragon lightning strikes, it disperses and corrects, it puts things into messages and motions, it straightens the spoiled roots of nature, it brings the limits to these who had grown too loose in mind. Everything shaped in proper form, a fountain, the top is the spring of consciousness as it falls and fills the lower spheres of human intellectual, emotional and instinctual life. It is all evened and put to motion harmoniously and in a splendid fashion, on the fountain as an emblem of a republic. Whether to sacrifice one's highest nature is a question of discernment and sound judgment. It should not be kept as a property nor disposed of freely. It should guide roughly and should not be severed from the lower nature nevertheless. By understanding an elevated position in relation to heaven is to understand the whole of the events set in motion and thus to ameliorate, harmonize, weave and amend according to justice. Nothing belongs to us. When we lose something, we simply return it to the world. Epictetus. Contemplate your defects, correct them, put this stanza. Sometimes excessive caution may be hindering one's reasonable act. If one is oppressed by a wasp and screams havoc, or is afraid of small pain and a little insect, then how should he deal with things of greater magnitude and proportion? Penetrate insightfully nature as it is, life as it is, perceive the starry heavens, then order and proportion foundations for oneself, and if such a calling be, for others. This was a very selective reading, and maybe I didn't pick the best fragments. However, I hope it will raise some interest in my other works. Thank you.